everyone, and welcome to the Robin Report program on retail as we work through the holiday season. It's a hot topic that everybody's interested in. I'm Deborah Patton, editor of the Robin Report, and we're here for an enlightening conversation with Robin Lewis, who's happily in the Florida Keys, and our featured guest, Ethan Chernofsky, who's the CMO of Placer, and he's in Tel Aviv, both warm climates at the moment. So just housekeeping, please remember to use the Q&A feature on your screen for any questions that you have for Ethan and Robin. And I'll be back at the end to field all the questions. So Robin, it's all yours.
Well, welcome everyone. And hi, Ethan, across the pond. So before we get started here, I'm going to give a little bit of context, okay? As you know, we've all been talking about the acceleration of online retail as a result of this horrible pandemic. It has almost kind of become sort of a panacea. People just are not confident going into non-essential stores. And I think a lot of people are even worried about the essential stores. So there's been a big impact. And of course, along with that, obviously, the appetite for apparel and fashion apparel has been kind of decimated and replaced by, I guess, Zoom-worthy apparel outfits, tops and no bottoms, or flip-flops. You can look any way you want. Anyway, and obviously forget the market for shoes, suits, ties, wedding gowns. So we are fortunate today to have Ethan to kind of decode or maybe demystify what's happening with offline retail with tons of data gathered as recently as this morning. So Ethan, could you give us a brief overview of what you're going to present and a little bit about Placer and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely, Robin. Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here. So again, just to give you a quick sense of what we're going to be doing today, and then I'll explain kind of how we come to our specific data set and kind of where the limitations may be for it. But when today we're going to look at kind of a retail status update. So where we are at this point, taking a look at the holidays and where the recovery was and is at the moment. But then trying to take a look forward to by, some of the big questions that are facing retail and try to analyze what the answers might be to those questions using data as a starting point. And so Placer, who are we? In the shortest form, we're a location analytics platform. And what that means is we show how people in the US are moving every day. If you think we say that people vote with their feet, so we are showing you how US citizens vote on a regular basis every single day to any location in the United States. How do we do that? So the first step is we observe a panel of about 30 million devices throughout the United States. We then receive anonymized aggregate data. So we are GDPR and CCPA compliant. We then analyze that data utilizing machine learning and AI to then make estimations on the visit patterns to any location anywhere in the US. And then we present that data in our dashboard. So we are a SaaS platform, which means our customers are paying for a login information and access to a platform where they can kind of analyze any question that they may have about what's happening in the world of offline retail. So, take an example like site selection. If I'm trying to figure out, or right sizing, if I want to figure out which stores maybe I should put somewhere else or close and where I should open my next one, using elements like a true trade area, visit trends will allow you to see the true performance, the true audience of any location, if there are cannibalization risks, where there might be a void, what are the other brands that I do best when I sit next to, what are the cross-shopping patterns, et cetera. And so it gives us this really unique insight into what's happening offline. Critically, we don't see online data, so we can't speak to the specificities of what's happening in e-commerce. But with this resource, we're able to provide a really, we believe, unique perspective on what's happening in retail. We have over 400 customers in commercial real estate, retail, the investor community, and beyond, and growing quickly. And I'm really excited to kind of dive into the content with you.
Yeah, Ethan, I'm obviously from the old world of retailing, but I'm learning every day, and I've already learned a little bit from you. But I can tell you from a macro view, I think your solution is brilliant. And it illustrates, once again, as I've always said, when technology is used as a tool, it is absolutely the great equalizer. It really has been a unique and difficult year for us, offline retail. So it's been a horrible year, really. So where do things stand at the moment from a data perspective? Is offline retail recovering?
So interestingly, it is, right? And I think there's two pieces of this story. So the first is, one, I think we've seen the resilience of offline retail in that this is the perfect storm of bad for offline retail, right? So not only are our borders are shut, so we don't have tourism. We're not supposed to leave our house. There's an economic impact to what's happening, and it's kind of all the forces colliding for what should damage offline retail in the most significant way. Yet we were seeing a recovery. We were watching up until just a few weeks ago visits to almost every sector slowly grow back towards normalcy. Now, obviously, the resurgence of cases right before Black Friday was another dose of terrible timing, but we were seeing a recovery happen, and it was happening across the board. I think one of the really important things that we also saw is that just because shopping patterns have changed and that visits are less doesn't mean that everything is terrible. And the example that we took was from Black Friday weekend. So if you think of Thanksgiving and Black Friday as these enormous retail days, they were down enormously across the board. And when you look at brands like Walmart, Target, Best Buy, Thanksgiving was obviously down completely, but Black Friday was down 20%, 27%, 43% on that day year over year.
Wow.
And this is the strongest day of the year for these retailers, but it wasn't happening in isolation. So the thing we saw that at the same time that these visits were dropping, the magnitude of these visits was changing as well. So even though Black Friday had the longest visit duration of any day for the year for these brands, and that's the slide you're seeing kind of ahead of you on the bottom right, Walmart, Target, and Best Buy all saw substantial increases in visit duration. Now, what's been fascinating is over the last few months, we've found is that visit duration is a very high indicator of two really important things. One is intent. So if I'm willing to go to a store for 5 minutes, maybe I don't buy something. If I'm willing to go to a Walmart or Target for 50 minutes, you could be pretty confident that I'm walking out with a few items. And even more than that, as visit duration increases, it's generally a good indication that basket size is actually increasing over time as well. And it's one of the critical things that we've seen over the past few months of that, if you think about a Walmart, in several of their recent earnings calls, they talked about transactions being down in that about a 9 to 11% range. And that's exactly what we've seen in the foot traffic data. But at the same time, they were talking about massive increases in basket size. And those basket size increases have offset the losses in traffic and the drops in transactions, allowing them to still be profitable within this situation. It's a really important lesson because when we look back at this holiday period, we are going to talk about the massive visit declines, and they are incredibly significant and a difficult obstacle for many retailers to overcome. But we're also going to be talking about the fact that shopping patterns adjusted in order to account for this. So more purchases for those visits, something we've called mission-driven shopping, where people look to accomplish more with each visit. And that's going to have a significant effect in mitigating these overall losses.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, even in a challenging year like this, there are brands that benefit, obviously. And what were some of these brands that really benefited? You mentioned a couple. And why did they outperform? And which stood out overall?
So I think there's two categories of strength within the pandemic. And the first is just out and out success stories. So if you think of a Lowe's or kind of the home goods sector, those brands didn't just do well in a relative context, they did well overall. So Lowe's, since March, has seen ongoing and consistent year-over-year growth. And it was kind of expected in that first quarter after post-pandemic, because they were essential retail. And there was this feeling that people had time to do these do-it-yourself projects. But that outlasted their normal seasonal peak, which would end in about May, June. And it's lasted deep into the winter, and it's still happening now. And that's showing us this sign that there are retailers who are well aligned with what's happening in the world. Think of an Ulta. Obviously their visits aren't what they were, but again, you think about basket size increases, mitigating these losses that are fairly small, all things considered. Again, this is a brand that was within 10% of their 2019 numbers just over a month ago, and had days throughout this holiday season where they've actually seen year-over-year growth. So this is a really strong performing brand, because yes, this wellness and making myself feel good and even kind of beauty products like makeup are incredibly still valuable even within this environment, to other brands like Target and Walmart. So Target and Walmart were, in many cases, the best positioned brands to take advantage of this situation, because when we talk about mission-driven shopping, the idea is I want to limit the number of places I go, but I still need the stuff that I want. And so, or want the stuff that I want, but I'm going to go out and get it. And at Target or at Walmart, I can accomplish so much in a single visit that it allows me to do more with that visit and giving those brands more value in a situation like this. So we've seen stops but a rise in the number of people who are coming straight from home to a Walmart or going straight home after a Walmart year over year. And this is giving them a unique level of strength. But there are also kind of sectors and brands that feel the unique pain of this situation. And it speaks to almost the flip side of what we were talking about. If you think the key trends driving shopping patterns now are this value orientation, mission-driven shopping, and think about who suffers at the flip side of that coin, it's brands like, 24-hour fitness. I can't go to the gym as often as I would want to. They orient themselves towards places where after work, I'll go in and work out. And that's clearly been decimated. Sit-down restaurants have taken a huge hit. Obviously, department stores, we've talked about a lot. Malls were closed. People didn't necessarily have as much to spend. They'll look to accomplish more with that visit to Walmart or Target, and that offsets some of that value. And even a brand like Whole Foods. I mean, we talked a lot about grocery being one of these well-positioned industries, but not every brand was or saw strong performances. And you think about Whole Foods, a major orientation towards cities, which saw this, exodus of people heading to the suburbs to kind of wait out the COVID storm. They're higher priced. They're not necessarily seen as the grocery store where you get everything you need. You get the items that you love, but it's higher cost. You don't necessarily want to spend all of your kind of grocery budget there. And this has positioned those brands to do far worse than several others, not just in the wider retail landscape, but in their own subsegments.
Yeah, there been a lot of talked about the essential retailers have really captured huge market share, stolen market share from the non-essentials, which, a lot of people say, well, that's very unfair. Well, too bad, survival of the fittest. Anyway, timing is kind of everything. And everyone tried to speculate and predict, impossible, how the holiday sales season is going to turn out. So I say it's impossible, but you've got all the data and you got all this good stuff. Do you have any clues? And according to your data, are there specific tactics that we can tell retailers work best?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's always this limited predictive capacity, even with data, just because things change so dramatically, so quickly. So to give you a sense of that, we had our holiday forecast piece that was looking at what we expected for Black Friday. And it was based on the data we had just seen. So we were watching malls tick up very, very quickly including huge year-over-year growth on Veterans Day. We were seeing some brands, Best Buy and more, Ulta, show really strong performances leading up. And then obviously there's this resurgence of cases with nobody can predict, and it has a huge negative impact across the board. So I think I'll use that as kind of the necessary context to saying what we expect. But the simple truth is there are some brands that have felt the pain less and see this orientation in terms of sitting at the nexus of a number of good trends for them. So take an example, Walmart and Target, others brands, they they actually see more traffic in the 3 days before Christmas than they do Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and that Saturday immediately after on a normal year. Why? Because there is this phenomenon of, oh no, I forgot to get a present. Or, uh-oh, we have all this family coming over for Christmas and we're missing items X, Y, and Z. And that visit is really substantial for these brands. So they have a strength. I think Best Buy has shown a unique ability to diversify when they were normally very Black Friday oriented. They've been among the smartest brands that we've seen in terms of introducing tactics that allow them to mitigate those losses in a very effective way. But then you think about some brands actually seem well aligned. So think of the off-price retail sector. Marshall's normally sees much stronger visits the week of Super Saturday than they do the week of Black Friday. The same for Ross. I know Kohl's is a department store, but their outdoor orientation makes them a little bit different. And so these are brands that, because they also have a value orientation, because their alignment with their normal shopping patterns is still there, they could see a very strong end to the year. The caveat here within that space specifically is a question of, again, does COVID come under a greater degree of control? Are there more lockdowns, which could clearly wipe all this out? And two, there's a big inventory question with off-price. Mm-hmm. A huge asset for them is this idea that people are overstocked. You can get it here cheaper. If you can't find it here, I have a colleague who says the treasure hunt is only fun if you find treasure in the end. It's not so exciting if you don't end up with anything. And then I think talking to what you mentioned about tactics, there are things that brands can do to try and turn this in their favor to the greatest extent possible. And there's two things that we look at a lot. And the first is owning the calendar. And the brand that we always look to when it comes to owning the calendar is Starbucks. Starbucks is genius in that they look at the calendar and they say, how do we increase our strengths and how do we come up with weird tactics to augment our weaknesses? And so, an example from last year, they launched a tie-dye Frappuccino. Now, let's be clear, I love Starbucks. I was not interested in the slightest in the gimmick that was the tie-dye Frappuccino. Yet, they saw an increase, not on a strong week. In the middle of July, when they would normally see one of their weakest weeks of the year, they saw better than normal visits. And that is genius because it's saying, how do we apply a little bit extra to our weaknesses and boost our strengths? And then what we saw, even the pumpkin spice latte, launching it every year just slightly earlier so we can bring in this period of peak seasonality earlier. Or free red cup day. What you're seeing in the graph is a massive increase of visits on November 6th. And the draw was a free reusable red cup. And this is a brand that understands their audience and they understand how to leverage that visit because you become part of the loyalty program in order to get the item. So they actually get this added value from it. And it's really smart and sophisticated. And then you think about, the other brand that we were really impressed with throughout this season has been Best Buy. And what impresses us most about Best Buy is not that they do well when they should. It's how they figure out how to do well when it seems like all the odds are against them. So when you think about May and June when they were reopening, how did they get visits? They did appointment-only shopping. Now, appointment-only shopping is really interesting because it does a few things. One, it allows you to limit the numbers of people in store. It allows you to limit your costs. It allows you to understand who's going in and provide a more interesting experience for them. But it also has an absurdly high conversion rate. So if you think, if I'm willing to make an appointment to go to Best Buy to look at a television, I'm probably going to buy a television. And so what they said is we're going to lose the number of visits, but we're going to try to improve the quality of visits. And that's something that any brand across any sector can do. If I'm Macy's and I'm trying to figure out how to deal with the fact that my crowds are going to be less this year, why not come up with a tactic where you get personal shopping between the hours of 10 and 6? Set your time here, tell us your favorite categories, tell us some items you love, and we're going to create something personalized for you. No, it's not going to be the same as a normal year, but it allows you to offset those losses. And very often you find strength in these tests in that it's something that you can replicate in a different way throughout the year to, again, find strength in areas where you might otherwise be weak and to develop new muscles and skills that you might not currently have.
Those are great messages, Ethan. Really good stuff. And but also tells me that the retail people have their work cut out for them. I mean, every day is a new day and things are changing so fast, but these are some great ideas. But so let's shift gears for a moment and look forward, which I really like to do because I can't wait to get out of this mess we're in 2020. So, and obviously it's going to go down as a year in history, unprecedented on so many fronts. So what have your ingenious analysts conjured up for the future? So let's start with, oh no, the mall and the shopping center. Those poor guys.
So I think we have to, I mean, what's interesting about the shopping center is every time you talk about shopping centers or malls, people say, well, what about the different classes of shopping centers and malls? And they're absolutely correct. Top performing malls are going to be fine in the long term. The weaker performers, they were struggling before, they're going to continue struggling afterwards. But what's fascinating is that for all of those different levels, there's actually a similar approach taking place, albeit with differing degrees of magnitude and focus. And that idea is that the future of the mall is different than the past, in that it doesn't have to be as committed to that classic retail orientation where everyone has a department store, everyone has the same type of food court, and everyone has the same mix of apparel retailers. And instead, it can look very, very different. And there's an example that, I grew up in, I went to high school in New Jersey, so I love the New Jersey examples. But, you think about the Westfield Garden State Plaza last year announcing that they were going to do a massive redevelopment of their location. And it was going to include a heavy dose of office and residential. And why is that so important for the Garden State Plaza? Because they see an overwhelming majority of their visits on Friday and Saturday, and they can't be open fully on Sunday. So if I can bring a slight increase on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, that's a huge advantage. But that means different types of retailers. It means more fitness. It means more food. It means things that are going to cater to the audience that lives nearby or works nearby. And that's the type of shift in orientation that we think is going to have a huge impact. So take a really poor performing mall somewhere in the middle of New Jersey that's doing really badly, has really strong retail competitors. The idea that they need to stay committed to the same model, try to fight for the same tenants is outdated. Instead, there are different paths that they can take. So let's imagine for a moment that they decide to put a school in their mall. Okay, not a classic mall tenant by any stretch, an elementary school. If you put an elementary school as your anchor tenant, all of a sudden it changes the entire approach you have to that mall. So for example, having a pediatrician's clinic there could be really smart. Having a grocery store as a tenant could be really smart. The different types of food retail that you would want. And that reimagination of what is essentially just a box can give lots of ideas and lots of opportunities to all of these different locations, shopping centers, malls, to create something better and more diversified. And the great thing about more diversification is that it enables more complementary locations. So, where I grew up, if you drew 15 minutes in one direction or 15 minutes in the other direction, the two closest malls were exactly the same in both directions. If they were fundamentally different, maybe you visit one weekend and another a few weeks later. But if they're the same thing, why am I going to both? And so this ability to start diversifying and being complementary to what's around you is going to be really interesting. And we actually think it's among the most important trends to track in the coming years, because it's going to define new types of retail winners, new types of shopping center and mall winners too. And the impact could be very, very significant. But it also leads to this question of like, who fits? So we know we're going to expect a Macy's when we go to a mall. We know to expect Bath and Body Works. We know to expect certain types of retail. But there are other types of retail that could fit just as well. And an example, we just put out a report about this topic. And one of the sectors that fascinated us was health. So look at Aspen Dental. Aspen Dental is a really fast rising dental clinic that's opening up locations across the country. Their visits are rising really significantly, even now, year over year. And what's interesting is their traffic patterns. So they see less than 3% of their visits on Saturday and Sunday. What's interesting is they also see the bulk of their visits in the middle of the day. And that means if I'm going to sit in the mall, I'm attracting someone from an appointment visit at a time when I don't normally see a lot of visits. And what's even better is Aspen Dental shoppers have a very high likelihood of visiting retail before or after a visit. So it not just am I bringing strength at a time when I normally have weakness, I'm bringing that strength to someone who might also benefit my other locations within a mall or shopping center. And there are a variety of different sectors that are like this. And it could fundamentally change how we view malls, how we view shopping centers. This distinction of commercial, residential, office, mixed use is going to change. Everything's going to become mixed use. Industrious, a brand that does co-working spaces in malls, can reshape a mall. Because in the past, what does an Office Depot belong in a mall? It doesn't. If there's a co-working space there, all of a sudden, maybe Office Depot wants a small format that sits right next door. Or CVS wants to have a mini format sitting right next door. So the introduction of these new types of players allows us to reimagine retail in a way where more winners can be created and more opportunities can be created so that retail is better for the shopping center owners, for the retailers, and ultimately for the consumer as well.
You know, you're hitting on a subject that I have been pounding away at, writing a lot about. I mean, location is not everything. What you're talking about is also reimagining what goes into that location. And with your superior ability to, with AI and data analytics, you guys can focus down to the local level in terms of what those consumers prefer and what those consumers are buying, what they want. And it gives you the ability to but to advise a given retailer about how they may shift their structural and strategic idea about what goes into, like Target goes into Michigan State University on their campus. And those stores are smaller and everything in them is preferred by those college kids. In other words, that's just one example, but I'm getting what you're saying, and it is a new world. Because it used to be without analytics and without AI, it was a guess, let's put our department store in the mall. And that's the way it progressed. Anyway, obviously online, it has forced changing all of that because online, it doesn't matter. But in terms of brick and mortar, so, what you guys, what has Placer uncovered in its data analysis about retail closures?
Yeah, so one of the no fits in with this topic exactly what you're saying. I think one of the things that shocked me, and as someone who is new to the world of offline retail when I started at Placer, was we went to an event and there were shopping centers, and those shopping centers had major posters up, and it said their audience based on a 3, 5, and 7 mile radius, and there were concentric circles around. And it said, this is our audience. And what was interesting was, Placer being my first standpoint, I was like, that's nonsense. It's not a circle. It's not like people live within 5 miles and that's it. If you're not within that 5 mile radius, I'm not coming to your location. We know that it's more amorphous and amoeba-esque than that. And what's really interesting is seeing that, because when you see that, it allows a lot more interesting evaluations. So when you think about a Sears, why did they close so much? Because they were using an outdated and the best they had at the time model for how do you expand? If I don't have something within a certain mile radius, then I can put another one. But what if people in that area were willing to drive further in order to get to that Sears? You didn't need to. And one of the stories that really drove that home for us was last year, Walmart announced that they were going to close 2 supercenters. And when Walmart announces that they're going to close 2 of their supercenters, we all kind of go, uh-oh, I guess offline retail is dead. The retail apocalypse is real. Let's just go home and pack our bags. But when we look more closely, and this is the image you're seeing on the right, we saw that the location in the blue was the one being closed. And it wasn't a low-performing store. It was actually doing very well in the state. But the red and the green, those images and the areas around them, those were 2 other Walmart supercenters. And essentially what Walmart realized is that people were deciding, which Walmart do I go to? Which meant Walmart supercenters were losing customers to other Walmart supercenters. And so when they closed the store, it wasn't a struggle. It was a step towards optimization. And this is what we want to see when we hear about retailers looking to right size. It's fine to close stores. so long as you're closing stores for the right reasons. If you're closing just a low performer, maybe the reason it was a low performer is not because that store was bad or that location wasn't well set up for you. It could be because you have other locations in the area. So the image on the left is 3 Macy's locations. And again, Macy's decided to close the one in the blue. And unsurprisingly, it wasn't a poor performing location, but it's cannibalizing tremendously from the location in green and red. And this is the type of sophisticated approach that retailers can now take in order to make these decisions so that every time they open or close a store, they're closing it or opening it for the right reasons and maximizing the chance that each one of those steps in either direction maximizes their overall success.
Yeah, it's great stuff. It really is. So, yeah, we've been focusing on offline, brick and mortar. How do you think online is going to play out? Additionally, what is the big picture? What will define retail for 2021?
So I think online is an important piece of the puzzle. But even now, when everything is perfectly aligned for online, it's still only a small percentage of the overall picture. You're talking about 16, 17%, and it declined actually in the last quarter. And what that tells us in a lot of these cases is that online's important. It's a key piece of the puzzle, but I'll hearken to what the CEO of Everlane said, a direct-to-consumer online brand, that said the worst kept secret of online-only companies is that it's impossible to be profitable. Amazon's e-commerce arm is not profitable because customer acquisition costs are huge, because returns are a massive cost, because distribution is a massive cost. And so the question is, how do you find that balance? And for brands that are very oriented towards offline, like Target or Walmart, it's how do we use that strong offline base to then bring an online value? And the same is true in reverse. So you look at brands like Warby Parker or Allbirds who are expanding their offline presence as a way of strengthening what they do online while tapping into the other values of offline. And one of the really interesting things that we saw was that even in this crazy period, online-oriented events actually drove offline value. So when you look at the graph on your left, what you're seeing is Prime Day 2020 compared to the equivalent days in October last year. And for Best Buy, they saw a 22%, near 22% year-over-year growth on those days for Prime Day, which is the most online of events that exist. And what it shows is that these concepts are so intertwined, and the brands that really want to do well, whether it's with an online or offline focus, need to have that omni-channel perspective necessary to say, how do we maximize both? So one concept that we've looked at quite a bit is this idea of micro-fulfillment. What happens, not if, because we heard about Simon talking to Amazon about having fulfillment centers within malls, but it's a waste of space. It's an inability to do sales. It's not the best usage of the space or for the mall or for retail overall. So what's this solution? The idea of micro-fulfillment. Imagine if, Robin, you and I decide we're going to take over Macy's. And in all of our new Macy's locations, we're going to set aside a small piece that's going to be a micro-fulfillment center. It's going to allow us to take in returns. It's going to allow us to send out items, but it's going to leverage that offline presence to boost online while making sure that our online boosts offline. We just heard from a gentleman today on an earlier call that brands see a significant boost in actual revenue because of returns when they're offline returns. Because when I walk in the store and I give back the item, maybe I see the thing I want to buy with that credit or with that money that I get back. And so the likelihood of getting a value out of the return is so much higher. And brands are going to increasingly realize that that value is an inherently offline value. And that mix is what is bringing a lot of brands to offline. So when you think, even in this year of crazy retail closures, where we hear about JCPenney and Macy's and all the rest, Nike announced that they're expanding. Levi's announced that they're expanding. Allbirds, Everlane, Warby Parker, all of these brands are continuing to expand their offline presence because they realize that that is where their increasing value is.
Yeah, big time. And I think that's going to accelerate as we go forward. So some trends, as we know, are short term, and others are going to outlast COVID. And there are real concerns that the economic consequences could last for a good long time. So what do you think this means for the retail landscape?
So, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. Like, there are three different types of trends. There are the trends that were happening pre-COVID. They were impacted by COVID in one way or another, and they're going to keep on happening after COVID. There were the trends that were started by COVID, but they are unique COVID things. So, you know, God willing, wearing masks will hopefully be a thing of the past. But there are some trends that were started by COVID that are going to sustain much longer than the pandemic itself. And one of those is the economic uncertainty that it drove. And when we think about, you know, lots of people lost jobs, lots of people are being more careful about their, you know, how much they spend. And there are sectors that are much better at aligning themselves with that value orientation. So, you know, the obvious examples are the Dollar Generals of the world, who we've seen in almost every state that we've analyzed an increase in the average income of the shoppers to Dollar General year over year, which means that people with more to spend are looking to spend that net money at a value-oriented chain. We've also seen a huge increase, again, for Lowe's, Home Depot, home goods brands like Bed Bath & Beyond, At Home, and the like. And what combines them? Yes, we want to figure out how to we've realized that staying at home, that there's a lot of things about our house that we don't really love. So we're willing to take on that do-it-yourself project, buy that new couch, that new lamp to spruce things up. But it's also a much cheaper way of approaching that problem than saying, I'm going to buy a new house. Because maybe that purchase is something you'll put off by a year or two, because it's easier to say, I'll spend a little bit on making my current situation better than I'm going to spend more. QSR brands, even though we see their visits down, it's because dining is down. People aren't sitting in the store as much. But because of drive-through, because of delivery, these brands have a unique level of strength. But even that traditional grocer, we looked at Whole Foods before as someone who's struggling. Albertsons has been doing incredibly well during the pandemic. Why? Because they're a traditional grocer that can provide all of your needs. And when we're a little uncertain about how much we should spend, we'd rather go to the grocery store and have a great meal that we cook ourselves, because it's a cheaper way to have something great than go out to that fancy restaurant. And so these are the types of sectors and brands that we expect to see strength even next year and potentially even beyond.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit before, but there's really been this rush to the suburbs, to find a better quality of life as a result of this mess we're in. So who are the brand winners for this kind of geographical shift? And finally, what are the key shifts in shopping behavior, and which ones do you think are going to stick?
So I think this shift to the suburbs is among the most fascinating, and was a big conversation for us pre-webinar. And what you're seeing on the left is the change in the residential population in large areas, because we don't focus that down from privacy reasons, of a drop to about 50% of the people who were living on the Upper East Side of New York in January. 58% of that number were still living there in October. And the concept is simple. We want more space. We're trapped inside a small apartment. We don't need to work from the office. We can work from home. Let's escape for at least a few months. The question is, what if that doesn't come back as fast? And what you're seeing on the right is actually visits to key professional areas. So we have over, I think it's 4 dozen key office buildings in New York that we included as part of this index. And you still visits down to almost 80% to those office buildings. People are not coming back to work the way they were. And even more than that, they're coming from lower distances. So if you live in the city and you live a few blocks from your office, yeah, you're going back to the office every now and again. But if you are doing an hour plus commute, you're not coming back. And these two trends give a lot of strength to the suburban environment. And that has huge implications, because it means two things. If I'm a retailer that in New York City that was catering to a specific audience, and that audience left, I now have a choice. Either I follow them to the suburbs and I start testing out what a suburban location means for me, what a format an outdoor center means for me, or I give up that audience. And either way, there's huge implications, because it means new types of retail coming to the suburbs, or it means major vacuums being created. And this work-life balance shift is also enormous. If I go to the office, let's say it doesn't go all the way back, but people start working a day a week from home, not going all the way back, or they go in late once a day. we've seen some major shopping behavior changes where audiences are clearly showing their preference. So for example, Costco has seen much more morning visits than ever before. And the question is, if I have the flexibility, and I love Costco. It is one of the first places I go whenever I visit the US. If I'm living in New York and I'm living in the suburbs and I can choose to go in late on a Tuesday morning, does that Costco trip happen on a Tuesday morning instead of on the weekend? And if it happens on a Tuesday morning instead of on the weekend or at the evening, that has other implications. What about the people who are sharing a shopping center with Costco? What about the free time that I have now that I was spending on a Sunday? That hour is now opened up for me to do other things. There are huge behavioral changes that will happen, even if there are only minor percentage shifts. I mean, one that has been endlessly fascinating for me is look at Dunkin' Donuts data. And granted, this is from May through June in 2020 for the same period in 2019. And you see blue is 2019 and red is 2020. And you see a massive difference in the number of people coming to a Dunkin' Donuts between 6 and 10 in the morning. Why? Because I was getting a coffee on my way to work, but now I'm not going to work. I was getting a coffee right after dropping the kids off at school, but I'm not dropping the kids off at school anymore. So brands like this have had to shift their entire mentality in order to account for these shopping behavior pattern changes. If those shifts come back and they're able to sustain even part of this shift in strength, brands like Starbucks, Dunkin', Panera are going to have a really interesting year, potentially hugely successful. And also think, if I'm working from home and I have 3 children at home, sometimes when they're in the house, it is very difficult to get work done. The idea that I could escape for an hour or two to a Starbucks, which is perfectly suited for that, at the cost of a cup of coffee and a muffin and maybe a little extra so I keep them feeling okay that I'm sitting there so long, that is a deal I'm willing to make. And the more people that are willing to make that deal, the more benefits brands like this could receive.
This has been fascinating, really has. Your data goes deeply into the weeds, which I appreciate. Sometimes it's hard for me to follow, but Ethan, you've done a great job of presenting this so that the average guy like me can understand it. But the insights and the analytic, and what the analytics mean and how they explain the present and predict the future has been fantastic. I learned a ton. And I hope we still have time for some questions from the audience. Deborah, do you have some there?
We have a few. This has been
Good.
incredibly interesting. This is one for you, Ethan. And it's a little bit of a side trip from what you've been presenting. So what advice would you give to young people who want to make a career in retail today? It would appear from your business and your incredible ability to make sense out of all of this, that retailing is going to become a career for engineers. And just talk to us a little bit about that in terms of what kind of skill sets do we need? Because based on your presentation, you can pretty much figure an awful lot of stuff out by following the data and not necessarily your natural instincts or the traditional kind of training and the soft kind of stuff that retail's depended on all these years. So what's up with that?
So I think it's a combination, and it's interesting because Robin said something that really always strikes a nerve with me, which is I don't know if I'd be able to do it. And I'll give you my favorite story that has happened to me since working at Placer is we were at a major event, and the VP of real estate for one of the largest retailers in the country stopped by our booth, got a demo, and said at the end of it, "Wow, this is really interesting. But I'm an older guy. I'm never going to be able to figure this out. If only I was like you." And my colleague looked at him and she said, "Well, interestingly enough, I'm the office manager and I started here 4 days ago." And so it wasn't like she had been living in retail. It's a lot of the value of data platforms is coming from the simplicity of accessing it so that people with tremendous amounts of experience are able to translate what we were calling hunches and guesses and experience into numbers. So we have so many customers who are, very experienced. And what we tell them all the time is data is not about replacing these ideas, this gut instinct you have. It's about allowing you to understand what that gut instinct was really telling you. Because in general, what it is you're quickly realizing something because of your experience, because of what you've been through, that then you can translate in the data and then teach other people how to do better, to see the world the way that you see it. But yes, to the original question, I think there is the combination of new technologies into the world of retail is creating a really exciting opportunity for people to find a lane that didn't exist before. And it's a lane that sits at the heart of these businesses. I think the idea that the chief insights officer is something that in a decade from now, every retailer will have, every commercial real estate player will have. And the individuals who recognize that now are really well set up for the future.
Interesting. So this is sort of tangentially related to that. Since you seem to, your business, and I think we could easily assume that data is like the guiding principle. I mean, instinct is good too, but so to create a marvelous experience in retail, can it be predicated on data, and that you can distill all these things into figuring out how to make a great experience for someone by culling all of this data and all of this information that's at your fingertips, so that you don't have any guesswork anymore? Is it that predictable?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's amazing when you look at really top performing brands is that they have a really strong sense of who visits their store. But what's interesting is they don't necessarily always have a sense of where those people are and how they could shift their focus to new groups, or what the impact of a change might mean. And I'll give you an example that I love that we kind of stumbled into late last year. We have a deep and abiding obsession with Target. We essentially, every time they do anything, when you look at the data, you're like, oh, this is genius. And so it's, again, you don't even need to look anymore, but we absolutely love them as a business. And I've always been as a customer, a huge fan as well. But what was really interesting was late last year, several key Target executives went over to Bed Bath & Beyond. And Bed Bath & Beyond was a struggling retailer. And they were kind of a middle tier retailer when everyone was talking about the bifurcation of retail to the luxury and value. And there was a lot of talk about, all right, this is the end of Bed Bath & Beyond. When we looked at the data, we found that Bed Bath & Beyond would do brilliantly with a Target model. That in fact, so many of the metrics were the same that if they could tap into some of that Target magic, they'd be able to succeed very well. So in the beginning of this year, we put out a piece in the first few days of January called our 2020 winners. And one of them was Bed Bath & Beyond. And we got a lot of pushback of like, whoa, it's a cute idea that you think you're a data company, but Bed Bath & Beyond is doomed. And we said for weeks, we broke down the reasons why. And when they did well, it wasn't such a surprise. And I think the idea is every retailer that we talk about, and I'll use the example of Macy's because they've taken a lot of heat in the last few months. Macy's is amazing to their core audience. Their core audience loves them. They love the experience they get. They love the way it's set up. Enjoy it when they go there. For Macy's to realize how they need to make upgrades and how they need to succeed in the future, it's about finding where that audience is and in those other locations where they can reach them, but then about figuring out what are the slight upgrades they can make on the fringes. So how do I attract a certain type of audience that I'm not attracting now? Who can I learn from? One of the best applications of our data is because it's applied the same data lens for the entire retail landscape, is for competitive intelligence. So when, if I'm Macy's, I'm looking at what apparel retailers like Nike or Lululemon or Under Armour are doing really well. And I'm trying to say, how do I copy that? Or I'm looking at, a Kohl's and saying, what are they doing so well offline that I can try to copy a little bit in a new format? I think what's amazing about data is that it allows you to take chances with confidence. So when normally every new location is a huge risk, it's a huge cost. If it fails, it's failing big. If I can limit the risk for every decision I take, maximize the chances of succeeding, I'm going to be a much smarter, more sustainable business over time. And that Walmart example is perfect. They close stores. They're successful stores, but they close them because Walmart is saying, how do I get a little bit better? How do I get a little bit more optimized? And I think the more retailers that take that approach, those are going to be the ones that really succeed in the coming years.
Yeah. Ethan, just a comment, interesting about Target and Bed Bath & Beyond. they hired their new CEO from Target.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that tells you
I think they saw
something.
the same. I think they saw the same thing. You know, there's
Yeah.
replicable models. There are things that are difficult to, look, there's only so much that Macy's can learn from Chipotle, but there's a lot that Macy's can learn from Best Buy. And there's a lot that, Best Buy can learn from. I'll give you a CVS is another brand that we love. CVS launched health hubs last year. They announced randomly they're going to take this concept and roll it out to 1,500 stores. The second they did that, we analyzed the 3 pilot locations. And we said, why does CVS love health hubs? And what we found was CVS loves health hubs because they bring visits at off-peak hours. So the middle of the day, they're appointment only. And CVS knows that those are high visit duration people. And so if I go in and I spend 45 minutes in a CVS for a treatment, chances are I'm going to buy deodorant or shampoo or a candy bar or something else on my way out. And that's something that any retailer can replicate by saying, how do I bring someone into a store at a time when I don't normally have visits? It's why Lululemon does yoga classes. It's not because Lululemon thinks they're the best yoga teachers in the world. They assume if you become addicted to them for yoga, you're going to become addicted to their yoga pants. And you're going to come to make all these associations and be there more and more. And there are versions of that idea that apply to almost every retailer. And what's unbelievably exciting for us is we get to be part of that journey with so many players.
Yeah.
In a strange sort of way, CVS must be like doing hallelujahs because all the people who are going to come in to get vaccinations, who are going to in turn buy up a heap of stuff just as they're so grateful that they got an inoculation against coronavirus. Yeah. But be that as it may. So one of the questions is from our audience is, do you see an opportunity for D2C brands to use vacant retail space to open up physical presences to take advantage of the click and brick benefit? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. There are, it's so hard for me to contain my excitement when I hear a question like that. It was, we talked about this at the end of, yeah, even for me, like at the end of 2019, we put out a report about the key trends that were going to define 2020. And obviously, many of them were not dead on because 2020 was a little different than expected. But one of the ones that we preached and we still scream from the rooftops is direct to consumer and product oriented brands are going to expand their retail presence and expand it significantly. And the opportunities, we did a webinar in August with a direct to consumer brand in the health space. And he was saying, the gentleman that runs their expansion said that in the end of the day, the customer acquisition value of having a location in a mall is massive. The value of limiting the cost of returns is massive. The value of distribution is massive. You put all those together and all of a sudden the cost of having an offline presence becomes so much more limited. And what's amazing is that finding all those values within that offline space is going to tell more companies that we should have 50 to 100 locations. And so we won't have lots of brands who are going to have a location in every city or in every town, right? We won't have that. We'll have many more brands who have 100 or so locations. And what's really exciting there is what we talked about before, Robin. It's a more diversified retail mix. And if you have a more diversified retail mix, you have a more interesting retail mix. And that's what's going to change the face of retail and potentially, if done correctly, make it better for all parties involved. And what's so exceptionally good there is you have more sustainable retail. You have people who are keeping their jobs longer. You have brands that are more success over time. And you inherently create a retail ecosystem that is sustainably successful.
Yeah.
So we have another question that's kind of a jump shift from what we've been talking about. There's a saying that if you want to know about what's happening in the future, look at what your kids are doing when they're supposed to be doing something else. So given that, do you guys do a lot of research on next gens and what's going on with the virals and other generations in terms of what their expectations are going to be in terms of retail and kind of combining that with your data and your analytics to get a bead on a farther look out?
So the answer is yes. One of the things that, because, when we showed you those true trade areas before, we're able to get that granular because of the quality of our data. What we don't do is we don't know who the user is. For privacy reasons, I need only anonymized aggregate data. I want to be on the right side of all regulations. But because we can be so granular about these true trade areas, we can apply demographics and psychographics on top with a great degree of specificity. And what we are seeing is what a lot of people have, spoken about, which is younger people are preferring to shop offline for certain types of items. Now, let's be clear. If I want to buy, certain types of kit, if I'm missing plastic silverware, I don't need to go to the store to buy the plastic silverware. But if I'm buying sneakers, yeah, I connect with the brand I'm buying it from. I am an Apple user since I'm a child, and I love the experience of the Apple store. I like to touch the products. I like to talk to the person who's the Apple genius who's walking me through the store. That experience makes me a more loyal customer, and it makes me happier about every purchase that I make. It makes me feel better about each one. And that can be applied across the board. People want authentic brands. This is why Nike's expanding. They're not doing it because it's easier. Yeah. It's easier for them to stay wholesale, but they're cutting wholesale contracts. Levi's is seeing a drop in their wholesale sales as opposed to direct. And so I think that combination of factors is saying, if I can find where that core audience is, and I know I can deliver on the experience, I'm going to do much better when I own the process.
Okay. Yeah. One last question. Of all the data that you guys are looking at and will continue to look at, is there a way that it can actually be predictive when we get back to whatever the new normal is? Or has this just been such an anomaly over the last 9 months and probably continue for another couple that it happened almost in its own time frame? And that I know we've talked about some behaviors that may continue afterwards, but can the data predict any of that?
Yes and no. So in a situation like 2020, where it's the anomaly of anomalies, it's always going to be very difficult to predict. But in theory, you'll be able to predict sub-elements. So for example, when we saw a state where COVID cases were rising, you could make certain types of predictions. But to look at the predictive power of data on a whole scale, look at the investment community. Some of the biggest investors in the world are what's called, quant funds, quantitative funds that they hire a lot of PhDs in data science. They create these models and algorithms, and they predict behavior based off of what data is telling them. So if you can find data sources that you can trust on and are accurate and reliable, yes, you can be predictive. I think we're careful to understand our role within the process. We are very good at finding the data, normalizing the data, making it accessible, making sure that our reports are easy to use so that everyone can find value from it and find that value as quickly as possible. But we're also careful to understand that I'm not the retail expert. I understand what this data shows about the world, and I want to be an expert of that. But we have many customers who are using this data to make really important predictions. Which new location is going to succeed for me? Should I make an investment into a certain brand? Should I drive, buy this shopping center or that shopping center? These are really big questions that require a degree of prediction, and our data is being used every single day across the landscape to do just that.
Fantastic.
This has been fabulous. So yeah. The last question is, can you share the deck?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would also, if I can do the one plug, like one of the great things about Placer is we really do believe in the power of data and the mission that comes with that. So we have a free version on our website at Placer.ai. It's obviously not as high powered as the premium version, but it allows you to get a feel for kind of a sense of the data and how accessible it can be and to answer certain questions. And we also have a section on our website called The Square, where we have a brand tracker that shows over 200 brands and what their traffic looks like year over year and week over week. We have a brand dominance map that will show you the top performing brands across a dozen sectors, an industry tracker tool. And so a lot of the data that we try to provide a really healthy chunk for free because we understand how important it is to provide this and to help make sure the entrepreneur and the academic has access as well.
Well, Ethan, Ethan, I want to thank you again so much for making me and the Robin Report a lot smarter. Right, Deborah?
Absolutely. And thank you for your noble mission.
Yes.
So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Our conversation will live on our website. So all of our viewers and people who are unable to join us will be able to come back to us and hear your words of wisdom. And then we can compare how well it did months from now. But thank you. Thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay,
Thanks again.
Take care.